Afternoon, folks. Russell here. Jeep Stroker 4.6. I think we're up to episode 9, I believe. Of course, on the previous episode, we did our camshaft, timing set, front cover, and the front crank damper. Today, we're going to finish up this short block. So that means we got to put an oil pump in, get our oil pan on, and then maybe any other little ancillaries on the lower block that I want to get done. So to preface, I don't know if y'all know, if you've watched previous episodes, there used to be a crank girdle right here. This was that girdle, right? And it's supposed to strengthen the bottom end of the block. Well, even with the proper spacers, I was still getting some interference issues. Not bad, it was still clearing, but it was a little tight for my liking. And on top of that, it created clearance problems with our oil pan. And since I have a brand new oil pan, I don't feel like using a BFH on, I'm not going to use the crank girdle. Quite frankly, this is, with a 12 counterweight crank, this is not needed. There's not any high-speed harmonics going on with this crank because of the 12 counterweights. It's fully counterweighted and balanced. I'm not concerned. Would it be nice to have? Sure, it'd be nice to run the girdle, but I don't feel like banging on the oil pan. So, without further ado, step one is, let's get our oil pump on. So I'm going to move the camera closer and give you all a good shot of what we got going on here. All right. So, just like previous discussions about paper gaskets, there's a paper gasket used between the block and the oil pump, and it's simple enough. It's dummy proof, right? Well, I am going to coat this gasket with just a little, actually, I'm not going to coat this gasket because it sits in a continuous oil spray. So we're just going to put it on like that. Maybe not. We'll put just a little bit of former gasket in here. Well, no, we're not going to. We're just going to put the gasket on. Put it on dry. And like I said before, this is a clean machine surface, and I've got a brand new pump. So we're going to lay the gasket down, and I'm going to grab the pump. This is a standard Melling, standard pressure volume pump, so I don't have to do any weird clearancing or anything. I will say, however, that it is a booger getting the new pickup into the pump. It is a very, very, very tight interference fit. And I could have shot video of it this morning, but there'd have been a lot of cussing, and I decided against it. So suffice to say, the pickup tube sat in the freezer overnight, and the pump got torched to really, really hot before we put it together. And even then, there was a lot of pounding and bitching and screaming. So gasket's down, pump goes on. There's two different length bolts. You have a short bolt, and you have a long bolt. And they have different torque values. So we'll hand tighten, tighten these down by hand, snug them up by hand. And I believe, yeah, the short one is 10 foot-pounds, the long one is 17. So I have two separate torque wrenches already set up. Have different values. And those are in foot-pounds, by the way. So it's 10 foot-pounds or 120 inch-pounds, and 17 foot-pounds or 204 inch-pounds. Just like before, I'll keep going back and forth with the two until our torque is stabilized. See how it still moves some more? Let's see if the small one will move. Nope, small one is stabilized. Alright, that's it. Oil pump's installed. Easy enough job. You can actually do this on a Jeep with it installed in the vehicle. You just remove the oil pan and you can do an oil pump. And generally for Cherokees and Wranglers, CJ7s, the rear main seal, as I've said in a previous video, can be replaced in the vehicle. You remove the oil pan and you can do the rear main seal. And it's always a good idea while you're in there, do the oil pump. Cheap insurance. So, now that that's done, let's put on an oil pan. So I'll grab the gasket. And the original Jeep gasket was a 4-piece unit. So you had a gasket that went along this rail, you had a gasket that went along that rail, you had a separate gasket that covered the timing cover, and a separate gasket for the very rear. And then they adapted to a 2-piece, so it went all like this, and then you had a separate one. And I actually have some examples of those gaskets. Or maybe not. All right, so now we're ready to put the oil pan gasket on. And as I was saying before, we now use a 1-piece gasket. The original was actually a 4-piece gasket. But even with the 1-piece gasket, we want to put small bead RTV at the joint between the front cover and the block. A very small bead in the corner where that gasket's going to make a sharp turn up. So in the corners here and here, and back here as well. Just a very, very thin bead. And it just helps prevent some leakage. And then once the gasket's down, I'll put a very tiny bead on the outer portion at that sharp turn. So I'm going to do a last minute wipe of the surfaces. Just to make sure it's good and grease and oil free. We don't have any issues with getting this gasket to seal up, because I don't want to be crawling under the vehicle to do it 6 months down the road. So, got my ultra gray RTV, and actually for this you could use ultra gray, ultra black, ultra red, whatever. I'll put a very small bead over here, if my tube would work. There we go. And a very small bead right here. All right. We'll set the one-piece gasket in place. And the reason we're putting those small beads, if you notice, at that joint, it comes to a very sharp corner, and that just helps it seal up a little bit better. And actually, the factory service manuals for the 4-piece seal had you doing the same thing because of the way the seal went on. Okay. So now I'm going to put a very light seal, very tiny bead of silicone at that corner right there, and then the same back here. All right, now we're ready to place the oil pan on. And it's really that easy. I'm going to pause here for a minute, collect up all my oil pan bolts, and we'll get this installed and torqued down. And I've already started putting some of the bolts in. I almost forgot. Over here on the front of the motor, I've got my bracket for my coil pickup. My crank pickup. And so I had to go grab it and get it installed. Now, 4 of these bolts are bigger in diameter than the others. They have a separate torque setting. So I'm just going to finish getting all the bolts in and running them down snug, and then we'll go through the torque procedure. Now, if you notice, some of these oil pan bolts have a stud sticking off of them. When you're doing an install into a manual transmission vehicle, it really doesn't matter. I just put them all on the side behind the header, but these studs are used to attach various transmission cooling lines, wiring harness stuff, what have you. This engine's going into a CJ7, which doesn't have any of that stuff underneath the motor, so I just put them all on the header side, and then you won't see them from outside the vehicle. And the last thing you do is this little retaining ring goes on the back here. I don't know if you can see that. This retaining ring slips over the back. And then the bolts go through it. So I'll just go around and snug them all up, and then we'll start the torque procedure. And I'll go ahead and preface this, when I actually start torquing it, I'll fast forward it. It's a long procedure, but I'm going to kind of describe it as I go. So the torque on the larger diameter bolts is, and they're 5/16 inch diameter bolts, not the bolt head. The bolt is a 5/16. The torque on those is 132 inch-pounds, and the torque on the 1/4 inch diameter bolts is 84 inch-pounds. So my torque procedure is to use a crisscross pattern and I'll torque all the small ones, torque the 4 big ones, go back, retorque the small ones, go back, retorque the big ones, and I will keep doing that over and over again until the torque has stabilized on all the bolts. And then, I won't film this part, and then tomorrow I will come back and check it again. That's called doing a long-term torque stabilization. And some people tell me for a vehicle that's overkill. That's the kind of stuff we would do on aircraft. But I'll tell you what, I have never, knock on wood, never had an oil pan on an engine build I've done leak using that procedure. And I don't care if it was a competition rubber gasket or the factory cork gaskets on some of the old Japanese cars. I've never had one leak using that procedure. Alright, time to get the handy dandy torque wrench out and get to work. All right, torque is stabilized. So the bottom end of this motor is buttoned up. I'm gonna move the camera, we'll spin it over and briefly talk about what else we got to do to this bottom end. All right, so we've got the oil pan on, and so the only thing we've got to do to make this a complete short block is to get the oil dipstick reinstalled. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and put the motor mount brackets back on both sides of this block. Like I said before, this is going into a CJ7, so we're using the CJ7 brackets, and I'll talk about something specific with it when we get to the other side. So, I've got an old stock dipstick from a 97 or whatever, some TJ, because my original dipstick was beat up pretty bad. And that fits in there awfully loose. So what I'm going to do is get some of that Aviation Permatex number 3 and swipe some around here. Seal it up real nice. And then we just bolt it in. And there's no specific torque on this, and even if it is, it really doesn't matter. The original had a stud and a nut on it, but that was all buggered up. So custom cut a bolt, that'll work. That should seal up nice. If it doesn't, we'll address it down the road. So, motor mounts. Let me grab the motor mounts. So the passenger side motor mount just bolts right into the existing holes. And I'll spin the motor around. To show this other motor mount. So when installing a 4.0 block into a CJ, you've got your CJ motor mount, and it's going to use these 3 bolts. But this bolt hole is quite a bit larger than the original. And I don't remember the thread size and pitch off the top of my head. If I can find it, I'll put it in the description below. But you've got to open up the hole on the mount. And of course, we've already done that. So these will just go right in. All right, so on a TJ, I'm sorry, on an XJ, this bolt hole's not used. These 3 bolts are used for the XJ mount. So since we've got to use the CJ mount and I need this bolt, I got to thread it. And the threading, and the reason it's weird, the threading on it's 12 mil by 1.5. So I had to go find my tap, and we're just going to chase these threads and clean them up. Now this bolt should thread right in nicely. Much better. So let's put the mount on. Alright, our short block is assembled, and I'll come back later and I'll torque these motor mount bolts or mount plate adapters, whatever you want to call them. I'll torque these up to factory spec before we install it. But for now, short block's complete. The next installment we'll put the head on, water pump, thermostat, whatever, and turn this into a long block ready for install. That's all I got for now. Once again, it's a long, tedious process to build a motor when you're still trying to run a business. So, happy to say we've got the short block complete. We'll get this head on within the next couple of days, make a long block out of it, and get it installed into the CJ7. So, that's it for now. Once again, if you like this content, go ahead and hit like, hit subscribe, hit that bell icon for future notifications. And as always, there's more to follow.